I have some slides if I'll share those, if that's okay. Okay.
Perfect.
And all right, like Lucia said, my name is Jessica Saucedo. My colleagues are Jaleah, Rutledge, and Jasmine Engleton. We are graduate students in community psychology at Michigan State University. And today we'll be exploring the role of graduate students in social justice activism. So just a quick overview of how we define anti-racism, because that's where our social justice activism has been focused on over the past couple of months. We believe anti-racism is a form of action against racism and the systemic racism and the oppression of marginalized groups. Being anti-racist is based on the conscious efforts and actions to provide equitable opportunities for all people on an individual and systemic level.
Right. Hi, my name is Jasmine again, and I'm going to be talking about our experience as graduate students doing this work. And so at our institution, a collective group of graduate students came together to work on making our academic space more inclusive and diverse. And we have focused on how we may be perpetrating racism in this space and have learned to be more accountable at how these spaces can be inclusive and not harmful to Black and Indigenous people and people of color. And so we came up with two ideas that we were focused on, which is diversifying faculty, which focuses on recruitment and retaining diverse staff and faculty, and implementing more measures to address retention and inclusion, as well as trying to establish an anti-racism task force that would be an ongoing task force and that would be doing ongoing trainings throughout our group so that we can continually do this stuff and it's not a one-time thing. And so when we were working together with other graduate students, we arrived at some potential barriers for these ideas that we are trying to develop within our respective programs. And so some of these barriers include group dynamics, sustainability of work, conflict with our own academic timelines, fear of retaliation, and personal burnout. And so with group dynamics, we talked about this with needing to establish like a clear vision for what diversifying faculty and staff would look like and dealing with differing opinions on what matters, how diverse, and what diversity counts. And so we had differing definitions of anti-racism, and we thought that can create conflict because the purpose of the group is to like all come together to be unified about what we want to see in the department around this initiative. And so we needed to make sure that we are aligned with that. So that could be a potential issue that we were facing. Also with the sustainability of work, graduate students may have other demands in the academic space, and this work is not compensated and is usually led by students. And so who are experiencing racism or via microaggressions or outright acts. And so that's something that could potentially hamper this work because we have other competing demands. And also with like conflict with our academic timelines, that still comes up. Like we have to do our master's, we have to, get our dissertation, our thesis together, other projects that we're working on top of doing this work. Also with retaliation, so graduate students have fears that when we're trying to make change, that could be helpful, that we deal with conflicting power dynamics that are already in place with our faculty advisors, with the department, with just the institutions we're at, and that we fear that, they could try to hamper that work. Also with personal burnout, it's a lot of work to do this and coming against opposition, differing opinions, constantly revising things to make sure everyone feels included, feels everyone's views have been respected and heard. It's a lot of work. And so that could potentially be something that we face with personal burnout.
So now is the time we invite the audience to give us any thoughts or feedback that they have. So although we're still working on how to overcome these barriers and really cultivate a dedicated team of graduate students who are going to work on these efforts at our own institution, we wanted to come here to invite discussion on what type of efforts you all have been invested in or wish to be in. We have prepared some reflective questions, and the first one is right here on the screen. And we just kind of want to know what your thoughts are about doing social justice work in academia, and if we should really be invested in this work in our own academic spaces. So does anyone have any questions so far, or thoughts or feedback?
Could I?
Mm-hmm.
Could you maybe pull up that question again if it's on the screen?
Because it's a roundtable discussion, I want to make sure that we all can see each other. So I posted the question in the chat. If that's
awesome, yeah.
Thank you.
So should graduate students be involved in anti-racism work within? Yes, definitely, of course. I think in an institutional level, there should be like administrative responsibility in making sure that all departments like and integrate a sort of like inclusive coursework that reflects the diversity of the institution. And what graduate students can do is like doing research like this, creating peer hubs, whether it's for research or whether it's a cultural thing or whether it's like an arts thing. It's important to sort of have the institution responsible for providing the structure, for having the departments to be able to inform the students how coursework can work, and for having students to become involved and to be to feel safe in having their voices heard, because especially in times like this, it's very important to have your feelings heard. And like microaggressions, as micro as it feels, like it's a macro thing. Like honestly, like it comes from a systemic cascade of racism and everything. So I definitely agree that graduate students have probably the most important and most under-resourced role in academic institutions and departments and programs in general.
If I can add to that, so as I'm no longer a graduate student, I'm faculty now, but I would say it's not just good for graduate students to be involved in this kind of work, but I think that the responsibility falls on faculty, staff, administration to find ways to reward and incentivize this kind of work. Because as you mentioned in your presentation, a lot of times this work is unrewarded and even people retaliate against you and find ways to try to stall your progress or hurt your career in the future. And so I think that I think that the responsibility falls on faculty to encourage that kind of activity, to reward that kind of activity, and to find spaces where people can be recognized for their efforts.
So I have a question. Now that you are a faculty member, do you have like thoughts of ideas for ways for us to kind of motivate faculty members to see the value in this work when they don't see it? Because I agree. I think that, it should be up to them to kind of incentivize this work. But if it's not important to them, what are ways that we could kind of get them to see the importance of it and the value of it?
And on top of that, adding on to Jaleah's question, that going back to what Dario mentioned, Dario mentioned it's important for the institution to provide the space. So what if faculty and the institution don't support it, don't provide the space? What can we do then as graduate students? Because it is important. That's our positionality, but we do want to pose that question of should we or should we not?
Yeah, I would say for me personally, I mean, I wouldn't say that we're recording. That's awkward. I'll let somebody else respond to that, and I'm gonna think about how I'd like to word my response.
So I recently graduated from UIC with a bachelor's in applied psychology and sociology, and what I've seen happen, I'm not speaking for faculty or staff in this moment, but what I see happen for graduate students and graduate student unions. What happens as a result of administrative like neglect and like under-resourcing is graduate students speaking up, like developing unions, drafting demands, and holding meetings with administration to hold them responsible and to make them create like standards, because graduate students are like, they don't get the pay that they need to like have sustainable like wages to be able to like live and to actually contribute to the research. And they're literally like almost the entire backbone of an institution's research when it comes to moving forward the knowledge base of that institution, regardless of where you go. So that, like, speaking to the graduate student level on what I've experienced is the graduate student unions and rallying up and making like newspaper articles, making protests, like organizing is the answer I've seen so far.
Hi, another grad student. Wanting to add on to what Daria was saying, like coming from a smaller school where we don't have a lot of PhD students, it often feels like all of the institution is focused on undergrads. So if we want anything to happen within the graduate students, it has to come from us, and that the institution won't really think about us unless we're raising our voices.
I think also adding on to what Rebecca just said, in general, I think it's important for graduate students to organize. So when issues like this come up, that group of graduate students can be taken more seriously, and hopefully that faculty can provide a space within the department for those graduate students to organize and to get their voices heard on all issues. And so that when these types of things come up and need to be sustained, or the conversations need to keep flowing, that they're taken in, I guess, a more serious manner.
I guess circling back. So in my experience, when it comes to advocacy, there's kind of two motivations for not having that space. One motivation is, or reason is, like ignorance. And so in that case, I think that's a different strategy than if it's like an inability to understand that things are not okay, or an unwillingness to explore that. So when it's ignorance, then you can start by having conversations and stuff like that. I think that's a little bit easier to deal with. When it's an unwillingness to understand how certain structures are harming graduate students, or how certain behaviors within a department are hurting graduate students, and an unwillingness to explore that, I think it's helpful for grad students to have kind of a plan for escalation. So you don't start with, I'm gonna like not do my job and I'm gonna walk out and all of this stuff, but you start maybe with a petition or conversations, and then you just kind of have to have a plan for how you're going to escalate if those things aren't addressed. And really, I think social support is going to be so important. It is very hard to feel like you're the only one that's doing it, or that you're the only one that cares about it. So really being able to find a network of people who are who care about those issues, whether they're PhD students or not, that may be undergraduate students that are really invested in that as well, and you can have them as as allies as well in that, and maybe aligning yourself with other faculty that do see it, and having them support you. But unfortunately, a lot of that ends up falling on faculty of color, and other faculty from marginalized backgrounds. And so really trying to, where you can, find allies, so you're not just asking the same 2-3 people every time to help you with an issue, I think will be really important.
I appreciate what everyone has mentioned, and I want to take time into consideration for now. We do want to pose another question that I think all of you have touched on a little bit. So instead of sharing my screen, I'm going to share it in the chat, and that is, let's fix this. How should graduate students do this work? Sorry, while
I put in Jess.
Oh, thank you very much, Jaleah. So yeah, How should graduate students do the work while reconciling group dynamic issues such as trust? And Crystal, you touched on this a little bit. We should have this social support in order to do the work. But sometimes even going into this work, we personally on our end, we found that work and trust it changed over time. And although we have some social support, we actually lost some social support. What do we do then?
I also like to add, it's kind of like coming from like an organizing position, like how do you organize and keep people like together and supporting each other, and then like dealing with like issues when like violations of like trust or even like, you know, differing opinions and not trying to get everyone a fraction off, like what would be some strategies for that, or if anyone has experience with that. So to be, because I don't want to like speak on events that happen with other people that aren't here. So it was just like vaguely what happened was that like things that we were pushing for weren't all agreed upon and understood correctly, and people felt it took it personally and lost trust around that, and trying to figure out like what do you do when things like that happen. And people like want to do other things, but that's not in alignment with the group, or yeah.
Hi, my name is Rashonda. I apologize that my screen is not showing, but I wanted to respond to this question. So I asked that because one of the things that I've found in sort of, you know, organizing or building social support is that folks need like clear goal sets or clear understanding, if you will, at the beginning of any sort of organizing. So not to say that wasn't done, but when we're discussing like how do you build that, I think it's always going to be this kind of ebb and flow of folks agreeing and disagreeing, and it's going to, if the group is to a point where we can say, you know, we may agree or disagree, but we still had the same goal and the same purpose for why we're doing this work. Because if you have a group of 20 people, it's not always possible for all those 20 people to agree on the same thing. But if everybody can agree on the overall goal and just acknowledge there's different strategies to get there, to me, that helps to build social support. It helps to build trust that like, even though we might disagree, like we're still on the same team. So that was just sort of why I asked that question, because I think that's really important whenever you're trying to build social support.
Thank you for that feedback, Rashonda. And I see David also made some comments in the chat about finding what you can agree on and focus on that. So thank you. Does anybody else? How are we doing on time, Lucia? Sorry, I'm not keeping track.
Yeah, we have 3 more minutes. I give you guys 5 more minutes because we're good on time. So we have 3 more minutes to wrap up.
Okay. Did anyone else have a response to the last question that we posed?
I would just add, I think everything Rashonda said is like right on. Having a shared goal and having a shared purpose that you can always come back to no matter what gets in the way can be really important. Taking time to kind of foster that social support, I think, and that trust and that goal sharing before you jump right into the specific organizing effort that you're trying to address, I think can also be beneficial in terms of creating a unit that feels cohesive beyond the specific organizing effort that you are focusing on, and having those conversations about like discomfort, and you know, if you're talking about anti-Blackness or anti-racist efforts, making sure that you're organizing with people that you can have kind of general conversations around anti-racism and anti-Blackness kind of before you jump into things, I think can be really important. we have a graduate student association at DePaul. We'll be talking next. But a lot of something I was grateful for was because I could have a lot of these conversations kind of more generally with a lot of my collaborators before we kind of jumped into doing specific tasks. It made it easy, for example, for me as a Black woman to go to a lot of like my white allies and co-students and kind of like pretty directly ask them, I think that there are some things that we should tackle, and I think that this responsibility needs to be shared between us all. So that was beneficial in my experience.
Thank you for sharing that, Kat. And I see Chris in the comments. Another tactic is to find different ways to take action so that folks willing to take action have different ways, higher and lower risk ways to take action. Yes. Thank you.
And I think to summarize, because I have a feeling we are at time for now, to summarize, yes, graduate students should be doing the work. We are the backbone, as Dario mentioned, I believe. Yeah, we are the backbone of a lot of research at bigger institutions, even smaller institutions. How do we do the work? Well, we create social support, we create trust before even jumping into organizing. And there will always be some ebb and flow between organizers. We're never always going to agree in a group of 20, but as long as we're doing, I think the message I got was, as long as we're doing the work, we're doing something to then build up the foundations for institutions to start to become more accountable for anti-racism at higher institutions. Hopefully I covered that, and hopefully we can come back to this. I'm looking forward to seeing the other presentations. So
thank you.
Thank you so much, guys. That was great. I think it was great that people were able to chime in and give their opinions in this topic, because it obviously affects everybody. So thank you so much.